In the last video, we mostly restored this IBM Aptiva 2153. While it's not perfect, it is largely functional now, and looks a lot better than it did. However, the performance of this machine is definitely a bit lacking, especially for gaming. Now, this was never a gaming machine, and really it isn't that great of a candidate to be turned into one either. But I love pushing these older, unloved OEM machines to do things that they were never intended to do, so let's see what we can do to help this thing out. Our major changes to the hardware are going to be increasing CPU performance, and adding something better than the so far terribly performing 4MB ATI Rage Pro that's built into the motherboard. We're also going to do some minor stuff like adding a modem, which the machine would have originally shipped with, and upgrading Windows 98 First Edition to Second Edition. The first task was actually to update the BIOS. This wouldn't normally be something I'd worry about on a computer like this, but I was curious to see if a K62 Plus CPU would work in here. I'll share the findings of that later, but the first hurdle was actually finding the file to flash the BIOS to begin with. Old OEM machines that aren't Dell's can be pretty tricky to find BIOS files for them. Dell just happens to have a great support archive that I will always praise them for. Thankfully, it wasn't too hard to find as I stumbled across Don5408's unofficial Aptiva support page. One of those classic websites that has just sat there for decades that has tons of info on them. I love finding sites like these, even though this one appears to have been mirrored by someone. Doesn't really matter though, since I was able to find the BIOS update on the site. Unfortunately, all the download links seem to be broken, so that made things significantly harder. I did, however, have the file name I knew I was looking for, and I figured that if I could find an archive of IBM's FTP server from back then, I could probably find the update. Thankfully, an archive wasn't too hard to find, thanks Kev009, and I finally had my hands on flyflash.exe. After all the effort to track this down, I got it on the Aptiva, had it write the program to a floppy, rebooted, and was greeted with the message telling me I was already on the latest BIOS. Well, there's like 45 minutes of not getting back, but it at least confirms that we presumably have the latest BIOS. On the Aptiva support page, there was also an update for the ALI, IDE, and AGP driver. According to the site, the update would actually fix the issue I was having with ScanDisk running every time I turned off the computer, even though I was properly shutting it down. I was also able to find the update on the FTP archive, although I probably could have used any generic ALI driver update. And this did happen to fix the issue with ScanDisk, so that's a relief. There was also the issue of audio. I didn't include this in the last video due to time, but in Quake 2 the audio was really screwed up and had this constant stuttering problem. Now this is an interesting thing I noticed with Quake 2. The audio is very screwed up. While it could be fixed by running the game in compatibility mode, I wanted to fix the issue outright. After failing to get the correct Crystal Audio drivers like 3 times, the updated drivers managed to fix that issue, so it was worth it. With those few things taken care of, we can move on to something that I've actually never done before. That is upgrading from Windows 98 First Edition to Second Edition. Before I had done the restoration, I had just planned to leave it on the original 98 FE to keep it original. But I came to the realization that the USB mass storage driver doesn't actually work on First Edition. However, while writing this, I did more research and learned that there is one that also works on FE. I knew there was one for 95, so I really should have figured that there'd be one for First Edition as well. Oh well, SE is better anyways, so I'm not going to go back and change it. Microsoft offered a First Edition to Second Edition upgrade CD back then. However, I don't believe this was a free update. I've seen mentions of people saying they had to pay for it back in the day, and it even requires its own product key, which, side note, that product key is unique to this specific upgrade disc, and other 98 keys don't work on it. I guess Microsoft treated Second Edition much more like a whole new release of Windows than just an update like I had always thought it was. Since the CD drive doesn't read burned discs, and actually since filming this video the drive has just become a lot more finicky on reading discs at all, probably needs a laser adjustment, and I'm starting to agree with Bringus that
optical media bad!
So I just copied the installation files directly to the hard drive and carried on. The update acted almost identically to a standard Windows upgrade, which I guess shouldn't be too surprising given what I've learned about it. Once the update was done, we're left with a Windows that, well, looks exactly the same. But it did indeed upgrade, and now USB drivers work just fine. SE is also supposed to have more reliable USB support to begin with, so we should be better off anyways. With all the software stuff squared away, we can finally move on to all the fun hardware stuff. First up is CPU. Now, I didn't actually test a Plus CPU. Hold on, I have a good reason. I found the IBM service manual for the computer, and it thankfully tells us what all the dip switch settings are. However, the voltage only goes down to 2.2 volts. I even checked the Acer manual since that's who actually made this board, and it also only goes down to 2.2 for the V-Core, according to them as well. Why is this an issue? Well, the K62 Plus runs at 2 volts, and 2.2 is really pushing it. I wouldn't run this above 2.1 for any real period of time, and I'm just not comfortable putting that much extra juice into it. So I think we're going to pass on the K62 Plus for now. There are unused switch positions, which might possibly have a 2.1 or even 2 volt option, but since they're not labeled, I'd basically be going in blind and wouldn't even know the voltage unless I pulled the board out and probably probed it with a meter, which I really don't feel like doing. Honestly, I'm not too broken up by this. I never intended to leave the Plus in the computer anyways, and was just curious if it worked. So we'll proceed with the original CPU. Since we have access to all the jumpers, including multiplier and frontside bus, we can just overclock it. It's weird to think of an OEM machine as being overclockable, but at least in the Socket 7 era, there really wasn't a great way for anyone to lock this kind of thing down without having to produce different versions of the motherboard for every CPU they plan to ship. Now, the FSB setting is useless to us since the motherboard is already running at 100 MHz anyways, but the multiplier can go all the way up to 5.5, which leaves us a lot of room. I started by setting it at 4x, giving us a 400 MHz core clock. However, this wasn't stable at stock voltage, so I had to bump it up to 2.3, which is acceptable for a regular K62. This made it stable, so I decided to push for 450. However, the computer wouldn't even post at 450, so we're stuck at 400. That's still a 50 MHz improvement for free, and you would have gladly taken that back in the day. We could swap in a different CPU to try and go higher, but this would have been a pretty unrealistic upgrade back in the day, just given the cost. Plus, even the high-end K62s are at best competing with low to mid-range Pentium 2s for gaming, so it simply would not have been worth the money. I ran some quick benchmarks to compare the improvement. In WindQuake 320x200, it went from 47.7 to 54.5 FPS. Quake 2 in software mode at 320x240, we went from 24.7 to 27.9. Then I decided to try out the 3D Now patch for Quake 2, which can help out a lot on these AMD chips. This got us 25.8 FPS at 350 MHz and 28.4 at 400. So far, not the biggest improvements in the world, but not insignificant either. And finally, in Cinemage 2000, it went from 2.36 in the ray tracing test to 2.65. I also just want to say really quick that I don't plan on upgrading the RAM in this system either. 64 megabytes is just barely fine, and I don't have another 64 megabyte stick that would be a good pairing in here, so I'm just going to leave it as is. Now it's time for the real star of the show, the GPU. I had 3 options that I was willing to put in here: an NVIDIA Riva TNT2 M64, a Matrox Millennium G450, and an ATI Radeon 7000 that was originally known as the Radeon VE. I was gonna try out all the cards just to see how they worked, but both the M64 and G450 just refused to work. I'd just get a black screen and a few upset beeps from the Aptiva. The Radeon did work, however, so I guess we're gonna go with that. This card is more than fast enough for a K62, which is why I'm not gonna try anything newer. I went with Catalyst 4.3 for the drivers, as to not use drivers that are too new and might hurt performance. Predictably, the performance isn't outstanding. We're dealing with a CPU bottleneck, plus the PCI bottleneck after all. GL Quake at the stock 640x480 only gets 44.3 FPS. I was kinda hoping for at least 60 in this game, but I guess not. Quake 2 just crashes in the same spot every time now, so that's fun. I thought maybe the 3D Now patch was causing issues, so I uninstalled the game, and when I went to reinstall it, it now constantly complains about my version of Windows being in the wrong language? Add that to the pile of new ways Windows 9X has found a way to break stuff. Oh, the joys of these low-end OEM machines. Half-Life is playable, sorta? While it visually looks a lot better, the frame rate isn't really much of an improvement over software rendering. The first few levels would probably be playable, but I have my doubts about the later areas. I can't even try Hot Pursuit now because it doesn't even detect the Radeon 7000. It still thinks the Rage Pro is the main video card, even though I've disabled it in Device Manager, and there's no way to disable the onboard video on the motherboard, at least that I was able to find. Oh yeah, the CD drive also really doesn't want to read any discs anymore, so I guess we're not getting anything else out of the system. I knew the machine wasn't going to be great or anything, but wow, it sucks. I know the CD drive thing is just related to age, but yeah, come on, man, this whole... These OEM machines, man, they're just not that great. Let's wrap this thing up before the computer just decides to die or something. Our last item of business is to put a modem in here. I have no idea where the modem that came in the system is at this point, so we're just going to stick this random ISA modem in here. No idea what speed it is, but it's probably at least V.34, which is fine, since the best my dial-up setup can do is 33.6K anyways. Turns out this is a K56 Flex modem. So yeah, it's only a 33.6K modem. Had to go through some pretty sketchy sites to find the drivers for it, but I did end up finding the right ones that weren't viruses either. Yeah, it just did that on the first time it dialed up for some reason. Hasn't done it since. Cool. It's only wanting to connect at 28.8K, which might be down to the fact I'm using a really long phone cable, or it could just be that it doesn't really like it. Modems are kind of weird like that. I decided to update the system using windowsupdaterestored.com, which is a really cool project aimed at restoring the old Windows Update websites. Only having 28.8K of bandwidth makes this a really long time to wait, so I'm not going to include all that. And well, that's kind of all I had planned for this machine. I was hoping the gaming stuff would at least be a little bit more successful, but I knew better than to get my expectations too high with a system like this. I would like to get the CD drive working again at some point. It probably just needs the laser adjusted, which I really don't feel like doing right now. Hopefully this video wasn't too disappointing, but that's just how it goes with this late 90s stuff a lot of the times. I swear, I've had the most problems dealing with hardware from like 1997 to like 2000. I don't know what it is. DOS era stuff is fine, XP era stuff is fine, other than capacitors, exploding. I don't know what it is. I genuinely don't know. It's just cursed, which sucks because I really like this era of hardware. Anyways, I'll see you guys in the next one. Oh yeah, by the way, thank you guys so much for 5,000 subscribers. A milestone I wasn't sure I could have reached just a few years ago. I don't have anything specifically planned for this, but I do want to get something out in time for the Windows 95 30th anniversary, so I guess you could say that's going to be the special video. Really hoping I have that done in time, since I'm only going to have like a few weeks to work on it.